Hi, everyone. My name is Greg Insco. I'm 39 years old from Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm a Zumba instructor, which is a lot more fun than pretty much anything else I do. But I've also done I've done about 80 movies and reality shows total. In fact, last night I was a Fox News contributor. For those of you that don't know, Fox News is a pretty right Republican network. So I guess maybe I'll have an interesting opinion, maybe different than most. I've officiated around 80 weddings, so I've got that to do on the weekends. That's a lot of fun. And I think most importantly and relevant to my testimony is I'm a former elected official. So in 2016, I ran for office, innocently enough, to bring back summer camp for the kids. And I was pretty naive as to how politics worked at the time. From what I've learned, it's a complex system of favors. Everyone owes someone something. That's the easiest way for me to describe politics in a nutshell. In 2020, I fulfilled my term. I was going to run again. The first time I ran as an independent, and I realized that this is a very polarized time, and you're not going to win unless you run Republican. So we do have to be fiscally conservative as a township, since we don't have an income tax. We can't just print money. So I ran Republican and I won overwhelmingly. It was amazing. After 4 years in office, I accomplished everything I wanted to accomplish. And I thought, I have other dreams. I have other goals. I've walked across the country twice. Once the first time, well, really both times, but the first time particularly, to honor my friend that passed away. She was only 19. She had a brain aneurysm. And they say you're only an idiot in life if you do the same thing and you expect a different result. So I walked across the country a second time. And unfortunately, that time, long story short, on day 82, I made it to Arizona, and an officer pulled me over and said, you've got two choices. You can either be arrested for walking on the highway, or you can get on the Greyhound and get the heck out of my jurisdiction. And I didn't like either of those options, but I listened to the officer, and the bus ran off the road. 70 mile an hour. I was one of 8 people to walk away. And now I know what PTSD is. And what I've learned from my injuries from the accident is no two are alike. That can be applied with anything, whether it's a school shooting, a church shooting, a car wreck. No two accidents are the same. No two experiences are the same. And, I have, it opened me up to be more sensitive to everyone's fight is different. You know what I mean? So I try not to compare or try to make one PTSD is the same as the other, because it's not. So listening to this testimony has actually, it's been enlightening for me, and it's actually helped me listening to some of these, because there's that you can relate to pain and suffering, and you can always empathize with that if you've experienced it at any level. So anyway, the last 2 years that I've been out of office, I still connect with my constituents. I still do my best to listen to people. And what I've learned is you're allowed to disagree if you listen. But if you don't listen, you can't disagree, okay? It's just, people right now, we're so polarized that if you get, some of my staunch Republican friends one-on-one, they'll agree with a Democrat. Really. I mean, they have way more in common than not in common. The problem is, because we're so polarized, is my Republican friends feel like it's not that they disagree with common sense gun reform. It's that they don't want to feel like they're letting the Democrats win, which is so ignorant. It's like, it's okay to lose sometimes. It's not, we all lose at something, but it's how you respond to it that makes you who you are. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some stuff I found online that I agreed with, hopefully some bipartisan stuff. It blows my mind that when I'm watching these campaign ads, people running for office they're using an attack ad against their opponents if their opponents worked with the other party. That should be the bare minimum of what we expect for our elected officials. I mean, your job is to listen. You can't say your job is to get it right every time, because what's right to you might be wrong to somebody else, right? but at the bare minimum, to listen to everyone. And if you listen enough, eventually it'll all start clicking. Eventually you'll see other people's perspectives. So anyway, I was there for Parkland. I had just gotten off a cruise ship. I went down there, and that was the first school shooting that I'd ever been on scene or witnessed the aftermath. And it was horrific. And I have to be honest, ever since then, it's like they get less and less impactful. A life is a life. But when you see it nonstop all day, every day, it's like it gets minimized, which is a horrible thing to say, but you get like desensitized to it because it becomes our new normal, and I don't know why that has to be our normal. They're just, I'm convinced that we all have way more in common than not in common. In fact, I'll take it a step further. I think the two parties are actually the closest they've ever been. The problem is they have to differentiate themselves from one another. So rather than starting with things that we can all agree on, like food and love, we start with abortion, guns. And it's like, wait a minute, you mean to tell me, like, when you meet somebody, hi, my name's Greg. Are you for abortion or guns? Like, who does that? Nobody does that except our politicians, because they have to separate one from the other to see, where you're at, when the reality is we're all so much closer to the middle than I think we get credit for. I don't personally know anybody in Antifa. I don't know a single Proud Boy, and I'd be willing to bet you probably don't either. But yet when we're having are you Republican or Democrat? That's where we start. Are you, it's like, oh no, you're Antifa because you want abortion, or you're a Proud Boy because you believe in, you want more guns. It's like, how did we get here? And, I think, this, okay. When President Trump ran for election, I really believe in my heart of hearts, had he not gotten the Republican nomination, he would have ran as a Democrat, and I think he still would have won. I think that was the climate of our culture at the time. I think people were so fed up with politicians that they didn't care who they voted for as long as it wasn't a politician. So I think Trump, whether you like him or not, was going to get elected no matter what, and that's just the way it is. Do I think he's a Republican? No, I don't actually. I think he's a Democrat, to be honest with you. But that's neither here nor there. The one thing that Trump did is he brought us together in kind of a weird way. What he did is he forced us to recognize who we are and where we stand. Okay, so I'll give you an example. I did not know which of my friends were Republicans or Democrats, and quite frankly, I don't care. I try to judge people on personality and character, not age, race, religion, things that you can't really help, right? And I noticed at my Zumba classes during the pandemic, when everyone was required to wear masks and be vaccinated and all that stuff, I noticed exactly who was Republican and who was Democrat. And I don't think I would have known that if it wasn't for this, political division we have. Now, once I found out my friends or family members what party they were in, I had to make a decision, okay? I had to either stay friends with them or alienate them and not be friends with them because they disagreed with my whatever my ideologies are, right? Which is horrible, And the problem is, this day and age, it's so easy to unfriend someone, to block someone, and then you'll never get their opinion. So, like I said, I'm going to read a couple things that I found on the web that I thought were made sense. I've got some conversations with my far right and my far left friends that I'm going to read to you. And then I'm going to close with a story about Uvalde, and then a video that's not funny, but a troll, but I can see where people could find kind of a sick sense of humor in it. So we've got a little bit of everything to cover here. All right. So first things first, I'm going to read here. There's a site that I would recommend everyone check out. It's called Everytown.org. I would say that this is primarily liberal, I would say for sure. But I think if my Republican friends alone in the dark, maybe away from their Republican friends, read this, they would probably agree with many of these points, right? Because at the end of the day, whether you agree or disagree with any of this, that's okay. As long as you're listening. I can't stress that enough. The world just needs to listen. And I think we saw with George Floyd, I think we all saw that was a good example where the world was forced to listen. And many of my friends came around to a lot of the social injustice talking points because they were forced to listen. So again, it's everytown.org. And the article starts off by saying the mass shootings in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde are the clear results of the violent world the gun lobby has helped to create and lawmakers have enabled. Americans are outraged and the Senate must act. Our elected officials owe us more than thoughts and prayers, which is the video I'm going to show you guys later. It's time to enact common sense solutions. Here are 6 meaningful things Congress can do to prevent senseless shootings. Background checks on all gun sales. Now, call me crazy, but I thought that was common sense. And most of us probably, whether you're familiar with the gun community or not, probably think that that's already something. However, nobody should be allowed to purchase a gun without passing a background check first. Background checks are the foundation of any comprehensive gun violence prevention strategy. Current federal law requires that licensed dealers run background checks on gun sales, but unlicensed sellers, including those selling guns online or at gun shows, are not required to. That means people with felony convictions, domestic abuse restraining orders, or who are otherwise prohibited from owning a gun can avoid the background check by buying a gun from an unlicensed stranger with no questions asked. I don't know how any Republican or Democrat could disagree with that. That's so cut and dry. However, I would happily entertain if someone would like to challenge that. I would love to hear your opinion on that. One of the facts stated here is that states with laws requiring background checks for all gun sales were associated with 10% lower homicide rates. Well, one of the other things I did for since I was 19 is I've been a landlord. I don't come from money. I work hard. I earned 21 houses before my 21st birthday. I bought my first house before I'd ever done a load of laundry. I was very sheltered. And I remember my very first eviction, I found out everything that was wrong with the world. I found drugs, child porn, and guns. That was my very first eviction. Talk about eye-opening. And I'll never forget calling the police thinking I just found the crime of the century. And they said, just dispose of everything. That's all. That's all they want me to do, just dispose of everything. So, I hear, my friends on the left saying, defund. And it sounds to me like it's not, well, first of all, our police departments are already being defunded, whether it's needing additional support for protests or whatnot. But really, yeah, maybe some of that, what are the odds out of, I don't know, say if you're a police department with a $10 million budget, what are the odds that some of that needs to be appropriated differently? I'd say 100%, because that's just being honest. And there's nothing wrong with going back and checking and redoing your numbers to be on the safe side. And quite frankly, times change too. If you're a department that you think you can reallocate your funds, more power to you. I would much rather see a police department try something and completely fail than to do nothing at all, which is where, unfortunately, I think we find ourselves with common sense gun control. Extreme risk laws. In many instances of gun violence, there are clear warning signs that the shooter posed a serious threat before the shooting, sometimes referred to as the red flag laws. Create a way to intervene before warning signs become tragedies. These laws allow immediate family members and law enforcement to show evidence and petition a court for an order for the temporary removal of guns from dangerous situations. In 56% of mass shootings, the shooter exhibited dangerous warning signs before the shooting. Now, 56% is obviously more than half. It's not foolproof, but it's something, okay? Point number 3. Confirm Steve Dettelbach as ATF director. The ATF is the federal law enforcement agency responsible for enforcing our nation's gun laws and keeping us safe. Without strong leadership, rogue gun dealerships and gun manufacturers have evaded regulations and oversight as gun violence devastates our communities. If senators are serious about reducing gun crime, they should confirm President Biden's nominee, Steve Dettelbach, as ATF director. Anything less is an intentional failure to provide this law enforcement agency with the leadership necessary to enforce the laws on the books and keep Americans safe. Now, nothing against Steve. I don't know him personally, but I would disagree with this. I think in this instance, what the country really needs is a Republican with the same stance, because people need someone that they can immediately identify with. Because chances are, if you're a Republican and you want this position, the ATF director, the Democrats are going to agree with you, right? So you've already got them. And then if you're running Republican, chances are you might sway a few of them, which is exactly what we need. I don't know that this particular guy, bringing him in, if he's, a Democrat, that the Republicans are even going to give him the time of day. So it's kind of counterproductive, right? So I don't doubt he's probably a nice guy. But again, when you use words like they should confirm President Biden's nominee, just mentioning the name Biden, you're instantly going to polarize people that don't like Biden, and then they're going to, not give Steve any credibility whatsoever. So with this, in this instance, I think if they could find a Republican in this position, just like when we were watching the January 6 hearings, my dad, who still blames Obama for breaking his microwave, even though I can assure you Obama has never been in my dad's apartment, literally says, I can't watch these January 6 hearings. It's all Democrats. And I said, well, obviously you haven't watched it, because it's actually all Republicans, many of which are Trump's friends, testifying against him. That gives credibility. That gives credence, right? So having an ATF director that's Republican, that has some of the same values as a Democrat, I think that's what they really need in this instance. Just like if the January 6 hearings were all Democrats talking about Republicans, zero credibility. You might as well forget it. The ratings would be off the charts bad. But since the January 6 hearings have mainly Republicans testifying against a Republican, I think that gives it credence, it gives it credibility. So 25 mass shootings that involved an assault weapon account for 25% of all mass shooting deaths and 76% of injuries. Let me read the point. Assault weapons are exceptionally deadly firearms, commonplace in mass shootings. They are generally capable of firing far more bullets, far faster than manual action hunting rifles. Regulating assault weapons can prevent mass shootings, injuries, and deaths. We need to take a long, hard look at how assault weapons are made, marketed, and sold to keep these weapons of war off of our streets and out of the hands of violent extremists. I get it. My friends on the right, look, I'm not someone that should have a gun because I've never used one. I have no experience with it. Doesn't matter if I'm Republican or not. I recognize that I probably have no business with a gun. I live in a decent neighborhood. I'm not worried about anybody breaking in. Out of my 60,000 constituents, for sure, less than 10%, maybe 1% of them legitimately need the guns for their farm, or they work in law enforcement or security or something along those lines, right? Now, that doesn't mean I want to take away everybody's guns, or they don't need them, or they shouldn't have the right to them, or anything like that. But you have to recognize, want versus need. If you really want a gun, we have shooting ranges and all that, and you can still get a gun, right? That doesn't mean that you have to be against, gun reform and all that sort of thing. I don't know very many people that actually need a gun. I know I'll catch criticism for that, but do you really, want and need? Do you really need this, or is it a want? And it's okay to admit one or the other. It's just, I don't know. I don't know. It's almost like an obsession that we feel like because we have the right to something that we need it or we're entitled to it. And there are very few things in this world that I would not personally give up for the greater good. Like my friends will tell me, well, Greg, you want us to take away your car? Those kill people too. And it's like, really? If that's the best argument you can make, you've already lost. I mean, that's just, you need a car, to get around. I don't know that you need, some of us do need guns for sure, but the vast majority don't. I mean, the fact that we have more guns in America than people, who would agree that we need that? You know what I mean? Who's going to take over our country when everybody has, I don't know. That's a whole nother story. Anyway, let me get to the next point here. The next point is raising the age to purchase a gun. All right. Federal law sets a dangerously low minimum age for buying firearms. The law prevents anyone under 21 from buying a handgun from a gun dealer, but teenagers and reckless youth have no business buying an assault weapon. We should raise the age to purchase these weapons across the country and make it clear that handguns and assault weapons cannot be possessed until a person turns 21. I don't know who would, unless you're 18, 19, or 20, why would you disagree with that? You know what I mean? I just assume kids be kids. Let them be a kid as long as possible. You know what I mean? Personally, I've had one meaningful birthday. It was 16. I got my driver's license, and we could argue that maybe that's too young for people to drive, but 18 was what you could buy adult magazines, and you could buy tobacco at the time. Well, neither of those things did anything for me, so I that birthday didn't mean anything. And then 21, I turned 21. We were getting ready to do Jello shots, and I looked around and I was like, wow, I'm 21. I've never had a sip of alcohol in my life. Why start now? And so I kind of felt the same way about guns. It's like I've never fired one. Why start now? Do I really need one? Do I really need to drink alcohol? So as far as, raising the age to 21, why not? Again, it could completely fail, and maybe we'll know from statistics, maybe gun violence goes up because we raised it and people want the gun more because it's harder to find and it's cool or something like that. Well, in that case, to lower the age back down. But to do nothing, I'm tired of doing nothing. Doing nothing is worse than failing, and again, in my opinion. Next point. Repeal the Protection of Lawful Commerce and Arms Act. Gun lobby-backed politicians passed the Protection of Law, Commerce, and Arms Act, PLCAA, that shields bad actors with the gun industry from being held accountable for dangerous products or irresponsible business practices that harm people and endanger public safety. PLCAA gives the gun lobby's corporate donors special protections that are not afforded to other industries. It's time for the gun industry to face the same kind of accountability as every other manufacturer of consumer products for its role in the gun violence crisis and lose its special protection. If every life is equal, why wouldn't we have equal, responsibility for your actions? Again, this seems like common sense. Those were the 6 points from Everytown.org that I thought were good food for thought for Republicans and Democrats to maybe go through and read on their own in their free time with no one else around in the dark. So that way they're not worried about being judged, God forbid, if they change their stance or if they kind of agree with the other side. But I would recommend everyone check that out. Next up, I want to read a couple of just conversations I had with friends. I'll start with my friend that's on the far left. And he had reminded me, this is so ridiculous, that I had actually forgotten about the P&G or the Fifth Third Bank shooting downtown in Cincinnati, Ohio. And that rocked our community. The problem is the following weekend, you've got another one somewhere else, and then you kind of forget. My sister-in-law worked in that building. And I cannot imagine had she been one of the victims in that shooting. I wouldn't have two of the greatest gifts I've ever been given in this world, and that's my niece and my nephew from her. And that's the thing. We do this thing in our country where it could never be us, and then it happens, and then all of a sudden you see the people that were against common sense gun reform praying and begging for common sense gun reform. I wish it didn't take tragedy to change people's minds. I mean, I saw it in Parkland. There were a few Republicans that they were staunchly against any kind of gun control, and then it happened to them, and then they were for it. Do we really have to experience a loss firsthand to learn from it? That blows my mind. So anyway, my friend on the far left, one of his other issues is the far right, or right, I guess you could say, eloquently shutting down the tendency to scapegoat mental illness for gun violence while also defunding illness programs. We saw this with abortion too. It's like, okay, if you're against abortion, that's fine. That's your right. But then you can't defund, welfare and food stamps, because let's face it, a lot of people that are, if they're forced to have a kid, are going to need those services. You can't have it both ways. You can't blame mental illness on gun violence and then defund or not reallocate or add funds to mental illness. So it's the hypocrisy in politics drives me absolutely insane. And those are just two examples. It's like, why is it so hard to see someone else's perspective and or God forbid agree with them? Again, we're all allowed to disagree. I'm going to say this 10 times, but we're not allowed to not listen. Especially if you're, constituents, they don't have to listen. But if you're an elected official like I was, you have to listen. It's like, it's amazing what you can learn from someone that's not the exact same as you. I would not to brag, but I did such a good job as an elected official that I never got criticism ever. So what I had to do is I had to purposely go out and seek it, because if all I do is listen to people that tell me how great of a job I'm doing, there's no incentive for me to do better, and I'm never going to learn anything. So we did, in my community, we had a small group of the vocal minority, and anytime I had something that was even remotely contentious, I would go to them to try to get their far right or far left perspective on whatever it was I needed to vote on. And I don't think elected officials do that enough. I think they listen to what they want to hear, and they, pat themselves on the back, and they don't have the incentive to be better, because once you're in office, it's so much easier just to get reelected because you're there. You know what I mean? And quite frankly, what person wants to listen to somebody telling you how bad of a job you're doing? I was fortunate that I had to seek those people out rather than those people seeking me. But I was, again, my constituency was the size of a small city, 60,000 people. Whereas, a lot of these higher level positions, they have millions of constituents. And I admit it's difficult to speak to all of them. But, if you don't have a pulse on your community or a pulse on the culture, how are you going to stand up and do the right thing? I get it. It's difficult. I can sympathize with some of these politicians that have a hard time doing the right thing, unfortunately, because, they don't want to take the feedback, or the criticism. Well, I hate to break it to you, but if you got elected, it comes with the territory. You have to take the good with the bad. So that was from my far left friend. My far right friend, let me preface this by saying, he is a gun. He prints certain guns. You hear about ghost guns and stuff like that. He makes certain parts. Is absolutely against any kind of gun reform whatsoever. So I thought he'd be a good person for me to ask to get some feedback from. So I said, hey, give me your thoughts on this. I'm still convinced we all have way more in common than not in common. And if it were up to me, I'd be willing to vote against something I wouldn't normally vote for just to say we tried. Because again, I'd rather try and fail than do nothing at all. I said, what do you think about making political contributions illegal from gun lobbyists? I said, at least that way, I feel like we would find out how much control they really do have over politicians, if any. He wrote 2 sentences back to me. He said, guns are protected by the Constitution. Are you going to make religious contributions or free speech contributions illegal? Completely diverted, right? Now, look, I get it. Guns are protected by the Constitution. But if you haven't noticed, everything becomes outdated eventually. You know what I mean? We all, that's just the way the world works. My response to his 2 sentences back to me, I'm not necessarily saying change the Constitution. There are lots of campaign finance rules in politics. I thought maybe if they accepted less money from the gun manufacturers, the politicians would be less likely to be corrupted. I'm going to get off topic in the middle of reading this. I remember, now the first time I ran for office, I didn't accept any contributions. If someone wanted to vote for me and offered me money, I would say, no, go take your family out to eat and then post on Facebook, vote for Insco. That meant more to me than money. Of course, I lost the first time that I ran for office, so maybe I should have taken the money. The second time around, I did accept campaign contributions. They were all small, basically under $50. The 99% of them were under $50, right? And I remember specifically an instance where someone had given me, I believe it was $20, and I said, hey, if you ever need anything, let me know. And then afterwards, I said, oh my God, that's what's wrong with the world. Now, I'm a microcosm, right? The national stuff trickles down to me. I mean, I remember our meetings. I knew exactly what people were going to say to me because they would watch Fox News and then they would come to our meeting and they would repeat whatever they heard. You would not believe how many times that my board was accused of quid pro quos by people that don't even know what quid pro quos are. They just repeat what they hear at the top and it trickles down to us. So when I said to this person, hey, let me know if there's anything I can do for you. It was innocent. I didn't mean anything crooked or corrupted, but I can see how, $20 is not enough to change anybody's life. You know what I mean? But I can certainly see how, $1,000, couple thousand, $100,000, $1 million, you say to the average person, they're probably going to feel indebted to you. They're probably going to vote in your favor if you give them that kind of money. So that's why I thought, why don't we limit or just eliminate the ability for Republicans and Democrats to donate to a politician, period. See what happens. And you know what? Maybe that doesn't change anything, and then we can lift that ban. Give it a shot. Give it a shot. You know what I mean? And if it doesn't work out, then God forbid, we'll lift that rule, right? So I was in the middle of this, my response back to him. Let's see if I can figure out where I left off. I said, I'd be okay with banning lots of different contributions to politicians. Aside from me, every one of these local politicians is still buying their seats. We have a problem with that in my community. People buy their seats. The person who spends the most money always wins here, except for me. I was the exception. Bless my heart. I said, I absolutely hate that. I said, we need a cap on a local level. We also need a cap on a national level if we're going to. But money tends to be the root of lots of problems. I told him, I said, death from religion aren't as synonymous as death from guns, because he was bringing up the point about, are you going to make religious contributions illegal? Again, he diverted. I said, if we banned political contributions from gun manufacturers, it may not change a thing, but again, I'm okay with trying something and failing than trying nothing at all. That was a few months ago. I sent that. He has not wrote me back since. I don't want to call a friend a snowflake. That's what they call the Democrats. But I can tell you, I like going to stand-up comedy shows. That's one of my favorite things to do on the weekends. And every single time, without fail, if a comedian says something negative about Trump, there will be an old white guy that will get up and walk away. Now, if you're going to call people snowflakes, you got to be able to take a literal joke at a comedy show. If you can't take that, like I told my dad, I said, Dad, if you aren't capable of being bipartisan or nonpartisan, then you shouldn't have the right to vote. That's the hard truth. So I just read the texts from a friend of mine, or two friends, one from the right, one from the left. I would say far right and far left. And I also, now I would like to read from Joe Morelli. He is a congressman representing the 25th District of New York. He put out something for common sense gun reform. And I thought, wow, I think this makes sense. And it's, even if it doesn't make sense, it's worth every Republican taking a few minutes of their time and reading through it to see if there's by chance something they would agree with here. And I would say out of, I don't know, he lists maybe 10, 12 things here. I would think it's impossible. The law of averages states, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, you're going to find at least one thing on this list you would agree with. Now, with that being said, I'm going to read some of these House of Representative. Okay, so one of them is H.R. 8, Bipartisan Background Checks Act of 2021. Now, admittedly, I didn't have time to go through all these to see where they are. This particular one, which I'll still read in a minute, has had 2 roll call votes. It was introduced and it passed the House. Now, it has not gone past the Senate to the president to become law, but that's where it's at. Some of these other ones I didn't have the time to look up, so forgive me if they were not even introduced or if they've become law, because I just, odds are they haven't done that, but I haven't had the time to read through all of them. Excuse me. All right, common sense gun reform. Every single day, 100 lives are lost due to gun violence. This adds up to over 30,000 lives each year. 30,000 children, neighbors, and friends taken because of a failure to enact common sense legislation. Sadly, It's not a matter of if, but when Americans will turn on the television to see that, yet again, lives have been lost in a senseless tragedy at the hands of a perpetrator with a deadly firearm. For years, I helped New York State become a leader on the issue of gun violence, helping to pass some of the strongest gun laws in our country, and I am continuing that fight in Washington. Now, I can already tell you the critics are going to eat that last line up because New York has a lot of gun violence. Just earlier this year, I introduced the Gun Theft Prevention Act, which sets security standards for firearm dealers to prevent deadly weapons from flowing onto our streets and into the hands of criminals. And I continue to support legislation that takes real meaningful steps to end the devastating cycle of gun violence. Here are the acts. H.R. 4423 Gun Theft Prevention Act to require firearms dealers to fulfill minimum security standards, require the ATF to inspect dealers every 3 years, and provide more staffing to the ATF. H.R. 3088 Untraceable Firearms Act to prohibit the possession of any firearm that is undetectable by airport-level detection devices. That's actually something that I have not seen or heard anyone talk about so far. And I think it's kind of like the Ghost Gun Act. It's a kind of a new thing that we haven't even had time to process. You mean there are guns that aren't detectable by law detection, airport-level detection devices? I had no idea. So, of course, we should look into that. H.R. 2510, Keep Americans Safe Act, to limit ammunition magazines to no more than 10 rounds and prohibit their future protection for civilian use. Okay, I realize you can have more magazines, but only 10 rounds. At least it takes you time in between to reload those, right? So 10 rounds. Why would you need more than 10 rounds? You're a really bad shot? I don't know why you would need more. If you're out hunting and you've put off 9 and you're on your 10th, maybe it's time to take up a new hobby, okay? You don't need 100, you know what I mean? You need to practice more, you know? H.R. 8, the Bipartisan Background Checks Act, that's the one that I just read before that has passed the House, to require background checks on every gun sale or transfer. Why not? Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you want a background check on every gun sale? You know, we require them for every. We require ID for every. Cigarette or alcohol sale? If you're depending on what state, I believe here it's if you look over the age of 40. Guns, I mean, why not? You know, at least cigarettes and alcohol, you're pretty much only hurting yourself unless you get behind the wheel. A gun, why wouldn't you? I don't understand why anybody would be against a background check on a gun. You know, I get it. You know, with cryptocurrency, everybody wants to kind of be, they don't want everybody knowing what they're doing. But, cryptocurrency, you're not going to necessarily kill anybody with, at least directly. H.R. 1752, Cool-Off Act, to require 3-day waiting period before a person may receive a gun after making a purchase. Have you ever heard somebody say, before you post something on the internet, wait a day to see if you still feel the same way the next day? I guarantee you, if there was a 3-day waiting period, there are a lot of people that would go, okay, maybe I, would maybe reconsider. 3 days. 3 days. I have no doubt in my mind that a 3-day waiting period will save lives. Because, we all have said things that we don't mean when we get mad. We're human. We're human. We're human. We make mistakes, right? But if you give us 3 days to cool down, maybe you didn't get to go hunting as quick as you wanted to, and maybe you didn't plan it very well, and it was a gift, and now you don't have that gift that you really wanted because it made you wait 3 days. But if you make someone that's just got fired from their job, just got cheated on, just going through a divorce, if you make them wait 3 days, maybe, just maybe, at least one of those people, I'm sure it's a lot more than that, will reconsider. I mean, it seems like when I hear these stories on the news, and I'm sorry I don't have hard statistics here, it seems like when I hear about it, they will say, oh, they bought the gun the day before. 3 days. Doesn't seem like too much to ask. HR 748, Ethan's Law, to allow for the injury or death of a minor resulting from unsafe storage of a firearm to be made a crime and punishable with prison time. Now, should parents be careless? Of course not. Do accidents happen? Unfortunately. So you're definitely going to get some pushback on that. But if I'm a parent and I know that there's a chance, well, first of all, no parent would ever want to put their kid's safety in danger. But if you have the added, maybe subconscious or in the back of your mind going, oh crap, I could be, if something happens with this gun, I could be punished. Maybe it's that little extra thing that we need to put that gun somewhere safer. Fair enough. HR 1808, Assault Weapons Ban, to ban the sale, transfer, manufacture, and importation of military-style assault weapons and high-capacity ammunition magazines. Okay, so you join the military, you're used to those sort of things. That's fine. I don't see why. I don't know that the ban should be on shooting ranges and stuff like that. You never hear about, or at least I never hear about, shootings at gun ranges, right? If you really want those assault weapons, there should be a time and a place for that. I don't think the time and a place for an assault weapon is a grocery store or a church or a school. But the time and a place for an assault weapon, I don't know. I mean, we don't have elephants. I don't know if we need to go hunting, one of those to hunt one of those. Maybe there's a farmer that thinks they need it. I still would say there's other guns they could use. But if you really want your assault weapon with high capacity rounds, I mean, why not make that allocated at a gun range? You know what I mean? Make it like an event, like it's something fun and exciting to do. We can go to the gun range and shoot these high capacity things, that seems like a relatively fair compromise. The problem is if we don't, where do we draw the line? At what point do we go, okay, well, that assault rifle, gosh, that was fun to go, shooting on my own property, but man, I need a bazooka. Let's see if I can find a tank. Where do we draw the line, I've got about 5 more of these. HR 41, make sure I didn't already do this one. HR 4118, Break the Cycle of Violence Act, to build safer, thriving communities and save lives by investing in effective community-based violence reduction initiatives. I don't know who would be against that. HR 3509, the Safe Gun Storage Act, to direct Consumer Product Safety Commission to establish firearm storage safety standards. I would be shocked if there aren't already standards. I just don't know them off the top of my head. So stricter standards, maybe there's some common ground there. HR 3480, Extreme Risk Protection Act, to encourage states to enact extreme risk laws to support law enforcement and protect families. I hear my Republican friends all the time, they've got we support our police, signs in their yards. And, if you support the police, you would support their families. You would support extreme risk laws. That just seems like common sense to me. But HR 3929, Disarm Hate Act, to reduce gun violence and prevent hate crimes, to ensure dangerous individuals are prohibited from purchasing or owning guns. HR 825, Gun Violence Prevention Research Act, to authorize the Center for Disease Control and Prevention to conduct critical life-saving gun violence research. Now, personally, I realize the CDC, they are coming off of being polarized by the right with all of the vaccine stuff. So as much as I do think we need some sort of a gun violence prevention research act to research these sort of things, maybe there's another organization that would be better suited for that, because as hard as the CDC works, unfortunately, whether you agree or disagree with them, they are extremely polarized because of the vaccines. So again, I don't know if you're going to be able to get my friends on the right to agree with something like that, because once you use the word CDC, you're polarized. It's unfortunately where we are. HR 5678, Firearm Retailer Code of Conduct Act, to establish basic business practices and certification requirements for gun shop owners and employees. Even as a dance studio owner, I have a basic code of conduct. I have basic certification requirements, a Zumba license. Why wouldn't gun shop owners and employees have basic business practices and certification requirements? They do have some, but you would think that they would be more heavily scrutinized just by the nature of what they're selling than, say, a dance studio, right? HR 1560, Resources for Victims of Gun Violence Act, to establish an advisory council that would gather and distribute resources for victims of gun violence. So you hear about class action lawsuits all the time. You hear about, there's pools of money that are set aside for a reason. If someone's a victim of gun violence, I would hope that they would be taken care of just like an insurance company would take care of someone in a car accident. Those are all the points from Joseph Morelli that represents the 25th District of New York. I hope that people will give him the time of day and consider some of those things, because statistically it would be impossible for even the most far-right Republican to read through that entire list and disagree with every single one of those things. That's statistically impossible, right? So the real question is, are they willing to agree with a Democrat? I was watching the January 6th hearings, and the guy that was counting the votes for Georgia, I can't remember his name, he was saying that he was going through with an attorney. The attorney had legitimate concerns. That's fine. He would address them, and then the attorney would agree with him and say, well, what about this? And then he would address them, and the attorney would say, well, what about this? And then he would address them, and the attorney would say, what about this? And finally, after he had addressed all of the attorney's concerns, the attorney said, in my heart, I just don't believe that Joe Biden won the election. There's your problem. Too many people are listening to their heart, and not their head. At some point, you have to listen to the facts. You're allowed to disagree. Do your research. And at some point, when you don't have any more disagreements, just like that attorney, maybe your heart told you wrong, All right. I want to read this from the Uvalde shooting. This, to me, was, I hate to say it, I've become numb to the school shootings. I know it's terrible, all the kids that died. But someone from Uvalde died from Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, and forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. That's what they died from. I'm going to read what that is, and then afterwards, after I'm done describing it, I'll tell you who it was and why they died from it. Again, this is what someone from the Uvalde shooting died from. The technical term is Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, and again, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. The condition presents like a heart attack. However, upon further examination, doctors can find no blockages in the arteries of the heart. When someone experiences a severe stress on their body, emotional or physical, it's been theorized the high level of adrenaline in blood can cause dysfunction in blood vessels and heart muscles. Dr. Solomon, an invasive cardiologist at Wake Med, says it often presents in postmenopausal women, but the pandemic broke those barriers. I have seen a couple cases as a result of COVID where they got broken heart syndrome of a year or 2 years later. It's on the uprise. The Journal of American Medicine found cases of stress-induced broken heart syndrome increased to nearly 8% since the onset of the pandemic. Even though you are healthy, you are still at risk of this, says Solomon. Don't sit tight. This is real. You can die from broken heart syndrome. The physiological cause of broken heart syndrome is not fully understood. Scientists currently think that a surge of stress hormones impact cardiac tissue. Additionally, a temporary tightening of the large or small arteries of the heart may play a role, and there may also be an associated change in the structure of the heart muscle. In most instances, the syndrome is not fatal. Broken heart syndrome usually reverses itself in days or weeks. When you experience a stressful event, your body produces hormones and proteins such as adrenaline and noradrenaline, sorry if I'm mispronouncing that are meant to help cope with the stress. The heart muscle can be overwhelmed by a massive amount of adrenaline that is suddenly produced in response to stress. Excess adrenaline can cause narrowing of the small arteries that supply the heart with blood, causing a temporary decrease in blood flow to the heart. Alternatively, the adrenaline may bind to the heart cells directly, causing large amounts of calcium to enter the cells. This large intake of calcium can prevent the heart cells from beating properly. It appears that adrenaline's effects on the heart during broken heart syndrome are temporary and completely reversible. The heart typically recovers fully within days or weeks. But this person that I'm about to tell you about didn't have days or weeks. The shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, that left 19 students and 2 teachers dead has claimed the life of another. His name's Joe Garcia. Joe Garcia is the husband of slain teacher Irma Garcia. He died of what relatives described as a broken heart. I truly believe Joe died of a broken heart and losing the love of his life, after losing the love of his life of more than 25 years, and it was too much for him to bear, said Deborah Austin, Irma Garcia's cousin, on a GoFundMe page created to raise funds for the family. The couple is survived by their 4 children. Not only did they lose their mom in their shooting, but they lost their dad to broken heart syndrome. He died because he could not cope with the stress of losing his wife. Joe Garcia died on May 26th after a medical emergency, according to their fundraising page, dying from what's known as broken heart syndrome. Joe and Irma had been married for 24 years. She had been a teacher for 23 years, all of which were spent at Robb Elementary. I love to barbecue with my husband, listen to music, and take country cruises to Concan, she wrote in a profile. Again, they have 4 children, the youngest of whom is in the 7th grade, according to the profile. Joe Garcia died of a broken heart. Who would have ever thought when they go to buy a gun that gun could cause someone to die of a broken heart? Someone that had nothing to do directly with the shooting. They just happen to be a victim themselves. I want to close here with a video from they call themselves the Good Liars. They were thanking Wayne LaPierre at the NRA convention for all of his thoughts and prayers.
And that's all I have to say. Thank you. The chair recognizes the gentleman at microphone 1A.
Thank you. My name is Jason Selvig, and I'm from West Palm Beach, Florida. And I would like to say that I am sick and tired of the left-wing media, and frankly, people in this room today spreading misinformation about Wayne LaPierre. Whenever there's a mass shooting, they all say that Wayne LaPierre isn't doing enough to stop these mass shootings, and even implying that Wayne LaPierre has played a part in making it easier for these shooters to get guns, to get weapons. You heard it after Las Vegas. You heard it after Pulse nightclub in Orlando. You heard it after Columbine. You heard it after Parkland. You heard it after Virginia Tech. You heard it after Sandy Hook. You heard it after El Paso. You heard it after Buffalo. You kept hearing that Wayne LaPierre isn't doing enough, and frankly, that's not true. The NRA, under Wayne LaPierre's leadership, has provided thoughts and prayers to the victims and their families. And maybe these mass shootings would stop happening if we all thought a little bit more and we prayed a little bit more. So I'm asking everyone in this room to think, to pray. Give your thoughts and your prayers and your thoughts and your prayers and your prayers and your thoughts. And if we give enough of these thoughts and these prayers, these mass shootings will stop. So I want to thank you, Wayne LaPierre, for all your thoughts and all your prayers. Thank you.
The Select Committee investigating
Thoughts and prayers. Is that really the best we can do? Again, I'd rather fail miserably than to do nothing at all. So although they do have my thoughts and prayers, as is everyone else's, I think it's time we do a little more than that. Thank you for your time.